Hello snowboarders of the internet, I am your host TC, and today I will be reviewing the Jones Hovercraft 2.0. This board is equipped with Jones Snowboard's directional rocker camber profile, and honestly don't be fooled by the name because it is going to be camber dominant, where you're going to have that camber in between your feet, and then that actual rocker on the nose is going to start right past the front foot insert. So it is going to be a larger rocker section in that nose, and you're going to have a tiny rocker section in the tail, pretty much right where that Hovercraft logo is going to be. What that's going to do is that camber zone is going to give you that power, drive, and precision that you're looking for with the rocker in the nose and the tail, which is going to help you out with the ease in and out of turns and with that float you're looking for. The Hovercraft comes in a 144, a 148, a 152, a 156, a 160, and a 164. I rode this board at Sunlight Mountain, where the day before they had 10 inches of just wet, heavy snow that filled everything in, and then the night before we got there, it was just 10 to 12 inches of the lightest, best snow that you could dream of, where it was great in the trees all day, untouched. We were the only ones riding it. Top of the runs were pretty much perfect as well throughout the day. As you got towards the bottom where most of the people were, it was super chundery, and it was pretty much just Chunder City out there where you could be getting bounced around if you're not on your A game. But I used my Ride Fuse boots and my Jones Mercury bindings. When we're talking flex on this board, it is going to be on that stiffer side for sure, where it doesn't feel quite like a plank, but you're definitely going to notice it, especially when foot steering. It's not the most foot steerable board out there. It's going to take a lot to get this thing to twist there. When you get to the nose flex there, it is going to have a little bit more flex to it, a little softer, where you can feel this thing kind of punching up when that really big deep chunder, but for the most part it's still going to be nice and stable. As we transition into that stability portion, it's going to be extremely stable, especially in that chunder and that chop. It's going to push right through it like a speedboat going through tiny waves. This thing just skips over everything, and pretty much because this nose is so long, by the time all of those big chunder piles get underneath your feet, they're already flattened out and you really don't feel it. So stability wise, this thing is nice and damp, where you're not feeling all that nasty stuff under your feet, but it's going to be able to haul through anything. When you ollie on this board, the first thing you're going to notice is it takes a lot to load up. It feels almost dead, or honestly a little bit planky, where this tail is so short and so stiff with that recycled material in it that it doesn't want to load up too well. If you're going to get it to load up, you're going to do it almost a day in advance, that dial-up style, where you're like, okay, like let's plan this ahead of time. But honestly, when you take it off of drops, that sort of stuff, the landing gear is here, where I had rock drops, little rock poppers, that sort of thing. Had no problem with landing on this. It felt super stable. Even when landing bolts in that really deep snow, that nose floated, that tail sunk, and it was all good to go. So I would definitely recommend taking this thing off of those drops rather than trying to ollie all over the mountain and pop those rollers. While I have you here, make sure to like, subscribe, click that bell, and turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of the content we have coming out. This board is made for power, not buttering. Even though you do have a long rocker section on this nose, it's still pretty stiff. I had to shift all of my weight over the actual tip of the nose there, where on other boards with this much rocker, you don't have to do that. This one, it's gonna fight you that whole way. I also felt that it didn't really spring me out of my presses when I was in them, but you know, just because of how stiff it is, you gotta work a little extra there. If you're gonna try to press or butter this tail, it's gonna require a lot of effort. It's so compact and it's so stiff back there that you're throwing all of your weight back, and it's almost an extremely tough balancing act, I would say, where you have such a tiny sweet spot on it, pretty much right where that up kick in the tail meets that 3D in the tail, where you have that tiny window to work with, and it's pretty much like balancing a unicycle on a tightrope. When I first got on this board, I'm like, it's a 160, you can volume shift on this thing a tiny bit. I was a little concerned with, just because of how tight those trees are at Sunlight, that I was like, uh-oh, this thing's gonna be a tank in here. It's not gonna wanna get around these things. I was wrong. Just because of how much rocker's in the nose, how well this tail sinks in that fresh snow, this thing wiggles really well, where you can just get around trees. You don't really have to plan your route in advance. You can just go and make it up as you go. And even on those medium and larger turns, the thing holds an edge like no one's business, where you can plow through all that chunder, especially on those days where it's all beat up at the end of the day. You're like, I just want to keep riding. You can with this thing. You can just push right through everything and still trust that edge that it's gonna hold, and you're not getting bounced around too much. It will Eurocarve. I did even Eurocarve through a mogul field, if you want to call it that, just that fresh, just chunky field. It went right through it. Surprisingly, I didn't die, and honestly, I don't think you would either. Rider in mind. This board is made for that guy that definitely goes out on those POW days, but they want to take this board out more than that. They want to be able to ride it on groomers, get in that off-piste conditions, and pretty much just be able to take it wherever they want. That's not the park. If you're looking for another way to get involved, head on over to Angry Snowboarder VIP. What is it, you ask? Well, I could explain it here, but we have a great video over there getting into it really in depth. I loved this board. This thing was exactly the board for the day. Like, I had no problems with it, even in that chundery, chunked out stuff at the bottom. It was just a blast. Like, from opening bell to closing, we rode all day, and this thing was so much fun. I didn't want to get off it, so I didn't. I just stayed on this board all day. Didn't even eat lunch. We just kept going just because of how much fun this board actually is. Comparable boards: the Libtech Retro Ripper, the K2 Excavator, and the Capita Navigator. Recommended bindings: the Jones Mercury, the Ride C8s, or the Bataleon Astro. ASIM or full wrap, that one's going to be dealer's choice, up to you. This has been my review for the Jones Hovercraft 2.0. If you're already sold on this board but are unsure of what pair of bindings to put on it, why don't you go ahead and watch the video that we have for the Jones Mercury. They are my favorite binding on the market.